In this video, we will continue to talk about rendering in 3D Studio Max. So we saw how we can create an exterior rendering using different parameters and the sun and the sky. And we changed the scenario from a day-night situation. So we can create sunset scenes, we can create dawn and dusk, and also we can simulate the night with the moonlight just by changing the parameters of the sun and the sky, which are basically a system of a distant light and a sky dome. So we can now proceed with other settings. We're gonna talk about the interior rendering using interior lighting, and we're gonna see again some techniques that we can use, some tools that we can find in 3D Studio Max. So we saw already how we can create an object rendering based on a single object, and this one is gonna be the exterior, and then we're going to proceed with the interior. We already saw different techniques, but we can use these tools and techniques also in the interior, like the HDRI or image-based lighting, and also the sun and sky. We can use natural light also, not only for exterior but also for interiors. We can illuminate our scene using natural light and also artificial lights. And also we saw how we can use the 3D Studio Max sample files, which are going to be already set up for Arnold. And in the previous video, we opened a city scene to start to talk about the exterior rendering. And if we go here in the folders, we can find in the sign visualization also not only this exterior scene here in architecture, but also some interiors like this. These are really simple interiors. Well, if you're interested in architecture, you can also give a look to other software like SketchUp or Revit to create really easy architecture to drawings and 3D models. So you have some samples here that you can use. Also, you can see this is a scene imported from Revit. So if you use Revit or ArchiCAD, if you use BIM application, you can always import and then work here using 3D Studio Max. And we also saw how you can convert from any software and render engine into Arnold using the scene converter. So these are the learning scenes. We are gonna also use some of those to explain some of the effects that we can use with the exterior rendering and interior rendering. We talked about also the fog or the mist effect, the environmental fog. So we're gonna also see how we can use it to create effects with light. Now, if you wanna reach this learning scenes, you just go in the Autodesk Arnold page here on the official website. And these are all the samples that you can download and use to test, for example, the depth of field, the motion blur, a lot of effects that we're going to see in this video concerning the camera. And you have some interiors also here. You can see you have an interior scene that you can download and use to test the natural light and the artificial lights and other settings that we're going to use in this video. And you also have there the fog effect, which is creating here some volumetric light effect. The volumetric lights are due to the settings of the environmental fog or mist. So if you set up that, you're gonna have that the more visible light, which is gonna be like more volumetric. And here is a scene with the depth of field. It's another effect which is due to the f-stop parameter in the physical camera, and also the motion blur, which is due to the shutter speed of the motion camera of the physical camera that we're gonna see later. So these are all effects again that you can open up from the sample scene and you can study from here. So we're gonna talk also about portal lights, which are particular types of lights which are not actually artificial, but they simulate the environmental light, the natural light coming from the outside. And we can use that with the volumetric effect or we can use them just simply by applying them outside the window. That is going to convey more light into your scene. So if you want to create an interior rendering using just natural lighting, well, probably you want to enforce that with a portal light. And also, these are other examples of volumetric light effects that you can create either in exteriors or interiors. And so we're going to talk about the camera and how the camera settings affects the exposure, which means how much light will get into your camera. And so talking about 3D Studio Max into your rendering. So by changing these parameters, you can get effects like depth of field, the shutter speed. It's going to affect the motion blur, but also they will affect the amount of light that is going to go inside your camera. So how much brightness you're going to have or how much darkness. So the depth of field, or also called DOF, is again about the f-stop. So you can see the values here. If you search for f-stop, you can use these in real cameras. So if you decrease the value of the f-stop, you're going to have a bigger opening size, a bigger size of the aperture. So the more you will open the shutter, and the more light is going to come in. So when you want to create depth of field effect, you're going to have more light. If you close the shutter, if you bring down the aperture, so you're going to increase the f-stop, you're going to have less light coming in your camera. So you need to balance all the parameters in order to have the effect that you want and the right amount of brightness. And these are other examples. So when you want to create depth of field, you need a focus point. So everything will in that focus point will be in focus, and all the other part of the scene will be out of focus. And so you can see here many different examples that you can check. And also, again, the shutter speed and the motion blur effect. Now, the slower will be your shutter, the more you will have the motion blur effect. And also, the more light will get in your camera, because it's a really slow shutter. So the faster will be the shutter, the less you're gonna have the motion blur, and also less light will come in your camera. And then we have other effects that we can apply, like the camera vignetting, which are these like black corners of the image that is gonna make it more realistic. So this is our previous scene, and we're gonna use this one here, but instead of rendering from the outside, we're gonna create more cameras and we're gonna get into the inside of our scene. So I'm just going to use, you can see there are also some spotlights, which I already set up. And I will address again the physical sky, the physical sun and sky. So I'm gonna bring back everything to a day scene. So basically I am resetting everything as it was at the beginning. So we already mentioned that you either address the exposure, you change the exposure, or you change the intensity. So usually when you run a render using the standard setup, you're gonna have that really bright light if you are in an exterior. So also I'm going to clear the scene atmosphere of the fog which we previously used, and I will go here inside the sun positioner and also make it not like a sunset, but I'm gonna bring that higher. And now let's see the change. Now we saw that when you do this, usually when you create the first sun and sky, they are usually too bright. So in the previous video we changed the intensity, but in this one we're going to address the exposure.